Hello, Serious Survivor here. Today we're going to talk about land navigation without a map and compass. There's no perfect substitute for a compass and map, but sometimes we have to make do with just our wits and our skills. And when we do, there are several methods that can help us. We will look at both day and night navigation in both the northern and southern hemispheres. Some things to keep in mind though: be familiar with the geographic features and natural tendencies of your current environment, along with the structures and landmarks that would be of interest when you are in a survival or bug out situation. When we are using methods that utilize a watch to help navigate, make sure to set the watch to true local time, or basically without any adjustments for daylight savings time. Know which hemisphere you're in. The sun is in a different part of the sky when you're in the northern hemisphere than it is in the southern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere is the part of the earth that is north of the equator, and the southern hemisphere is the part of the earth that is south of the equator. It's usually easy to tell whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere simply by knowing what country you're in. If you live in America, you're in the northern hemisphere. And if you still don't know which hemisphere you're in, determine this by searching for Polaris, or the North Star, in the night sky. The star is visible from the northern hemisphere, but if you're even slightly below the equator in the southern hemisphere, you won't be able to see it. 1. The analog watch method in the northern hemisphere. An actual watch isn't always necessary. You can draw a watch face on a piece of paper or in the dirt with a stick and it'll work just fine. Lay the watch flat on a level surface or face up in your palm so that the watch face is parallel to the ground. Point the hour hand directly towards the sun. Find the middle point of the angle between your hour hand and the 12 o'clock marking on your watch or drawing. Bisect the angle between the hour hand and the 12 o'clock mark to find south. Before noon, you'll have to measure clockwise from your hour hand to the 12 o'clock marking, while after noon, you'll have to measure counterclockwise from your hour hand to the 12 o'clock marking. 2. Analog watch method in the southern hemisphere. Hold the watch horizontal, point 12 o'clock in the direction of the sun. The key difference between the northern and southern hemispheres when it comes to using a watch as a compass is that in the southern hemisphere it's the 12 o'clock mark rather than the hour hand that you must line up with the sun. Then bisect the angle between the hour hand and the 12 o'clock mark to find north. The exact middle of the angle between 12 o'clock mark and the hour hand on your watch marks north. 3. The shadow tip method. Place a straight stick upright in the ground so that its shadow can be clearly seen. A stick about 3 to 4 foot tall will work really well with this method. The more narrow the stick is at the tip, the more accurate the reading will be. Now place a mark, stone, rock, or other small object directly on the tip of the shadow. Wait about 10 to 15 minutes. The shadow will have moved from west to east, and this time due to the Earth's rotation. Place a second mark, rock, or stone exactly at the tip of the second shadow. Now draw a straight line in the ground between the two marks. This is your east-west line. Place your left foot on the first mark, which is the west mark, and place your right foot on the second mark, which is the east mark. Now you will be facing north, which places south directly behind you, east at your right, and west on your left. This works anywhere in the world. 4. The alternate shadow tip method for higher accuracy. Take a short stick and place it firmly into level ground. First, mark the tip of the shadow with a mark or small rock. Next, use a piece of string, line, rope, or something similar to measure the exact length of the shadow. The first reading should be taken in the morning or at least an hour before noon. Continue to monitor the shadow as it shrinks before midday and begins to grow after noon. Once the shadow has reached the exact length of the string or rope that you took the first measurement with, then place a second marker or small rock at the tip of the second shadow. This method can take a few hours for the most accurate reading. Draw a line connecting the first mark to the second mark. This is your east-west line. Placing your left foot on the first mark, the west mark, and your right foot on the second mark, the east mark. This will once again put west at our left and east at our right, true north in front and south and rear. 5. Navigation by motion tracking of the stars, using 2 sticks at night in the northern hemisphere. First, get 2 sticks. One should be slightly longer than the other. We can line up the tips of 2 sticks with any star in the sky and then track the motion of that star across the sky to determine the direction we are facing. Find a flat, open area on the ground. Enough space will be needed to stand and place the sticks about 2 to 4 feet apart. Then find a bright star in the sky. Push the shorter stick into the ground and line it up with the star. Place the taller stick in the ground between the first stick and the star so the tip lines up in an exact straight line with the first stick and the star in the sky. Wait several minutes as you need to give the star some time to move. Check back and look over the tips of the sticks again and notice the location of the star has changed. The star doesn't actually move, the Earth rotates, which makes the star appear to have moved. If the star moved up, you're facing east. If it moved down, you're facing west. If it moved right, you're facing south. And if it moved left, you're facing north. The star will most likely have moved in a combination of directions though, like up and to the left or down and to the right. So we'll have to estimate our direction by how much the star moves in each direction or directions, southeast, northwest, etc. 6. The North Star, or Polaris. A simple way to navigate is to locate the North Star in the sky. This will only be visible in the northern hemisphere. The North Star is the last star in the handle of the Little Dipper constellation. Polaris can be located by finding the Big Dipper, which is usually highly visible. The Big Dipper is comprised of 7 of the sky's brightest stars. It is found either high or low in the sky depending on the season. Remember the phrase, fall down and spring up. The Big Dipper's location will be high in the sky for spring months and low in the sky for fall months. It also rotates around the North Star. As long as you're located above 23.5 degrees north latitude, the constellation is always above the horizon. 4 stars form the bowl or cup, while the other 3 form the handle. Regardless of the season, the 2 pointer stars, or the stars that form the outer edge of the bowl, always point to the North Star. Drawing an imaginary line from the 2 pointer stars to the next brightest star in the sky, and you will find Polaris. Unlike the stars in the Big Dipper constellation, the North Star is always located at a fixed point in the sky, which leaves it never more than 1 degree off from true north. 7. The Southern Cross constellation in the Southern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, the North Star is not visible, and there is no single star in this hemisphere that always indicates north or south, but we can use the Southern Cross and its pointer stars as a guide. The Southern Cross constellation is formed by 5 stars, and the 4 brightest stars form a cross that is angled or tilted to one side. Once we identify the 2 stars that make up the long axis of the cross, make sure to note the relative distance they have between them. These stars form a line which, loosely speaking, points to an imaginary point in the sky which is directly above the South Pole. Follow the imaginary line down from the 2 stars 5 times the distance between them. It can help to make 2 marks on a piece of paper or a piece of wood, the same distance that the 2 cross stars appear to be from one another relative to you. Then make another mark that is 5 times the length of this. Hold it up in the air in line with the 2 stars, and at the mark you made, draw an imaginary line from this point to the ground, and try to identify a corresponding landmark to steer by. Since this is true south, true north is directly opposite or behind you as you are looking at the point. 8. Using the stars at the equator. The Orion constellation is visible from both hemispheres depending on the time of year, but it is always a permanent feature at the equator. Look for Orion's belt. Orion has several prominent stars. The belt, which is 3 stars in a row, runs from east to west. The belt has a loosely speaking sword attached to it. Project a line from the sword through the middle star of the belt. This is the general direction of north. Orion lays across the equator. The belt rises in the east and sets in the west. 9. Using the moon. Locate the crescent moon in the night sky. This method for finding your direction only works if the moon is either waxing crescent or waning crescent, which occur approximately 7 days in each calendar month. The crescent phases typically occur at the beginning and the end of each month. Draw an imaginary line from the moon's tips to the horizon. Picture a line from the 2 points of the crescent that runs all the way down to the bottom of the skyline or horizon. If you're in the northern hemisphere, the point where the line meets the horizon is roughly south. In the southern hemisphere, the point where the line meets the horizon is roughly north. 10. Using geographic or local environmental features. Evaluate the trees for their heaviest side. Trees are rarely symmetrical, so one side always seems to have more growth than the other. Because plants need sunlight to grow, the side that gets the most sunlight will appear to be heavier. In the northern hemisphere, the sun spends most of its time in the southern part of the sky, so the denser side of the trees will usually be facing south. In the southern hemisphere, the heavier portion of the tree usually points north. In order to accurately decide which side of the tree is heaviest, walk around it a few times. Look for the densest area on the tree or the thicker parts. It's easiest to use this method with lone trees and open fields because in a wooded area, trees will compete for sunlight, so it's not as obvious which direction they're growing in. You can look for moss on trees. In many cases, moss tends to grow on the side of the trees that is mostly shaded. In the northern hemisphere, that means you can usually find moss on the side of the tree that points north. In the southern hemisphere, you would typically find moss on the side of the tree that points south. It's important to keep in mind that there are many other factors which create shady conditions that could encourage moss to grow on a certain side of a tree. Trees that are shaded by other trees in wooded areas and trees that grow on slopes may throw off your direction. It's good to examine trees that are in more open spaces and compare more than one. Deciduous types can tend to populate the southern slopes of hills, while coniferous types cover the north. These phenomena occur in the opposite manner in the southern hemisphere. Plant life and signs may help to determine direction of travel, but it's not the most precise method. Don't rely solely on these occurrences when navigating. It can come in handy when other methods fail. These are several methods, and I'm sure there are more. I hope this video was helpful and that you enjoyed it. The next video in the Apocalypse Tips number 7 series will feature navigation with a map and compass, and we'll go in depth on the proper reading, interpretation, magnetic pole versus true north, declination, and more. Please like and subscribe for more videos, as there will be many more in this series. That's it for now. Serious Survivor, out.